Emily Parker, a wealthy and powerful millionaire, stumbles into the secret life of her quiet employee, Michael Carter, after following him one night. Instead of going home, he disappears into a rundown neighborhood where he cares for abandoned children. But behind his kindness lies a hidden grief, the mysterious death of his wife. And Emily has no idea that her curiosity has just opened the door to a deadly conspiracy.
Emily Parker had everything most people only dream of. A penthouse with glass walls overlooking New York City, a collection of luxury cars gleaming under the streetlights, and a booming tech company with her name on it. At 30 years old, she was the face of modern success, confident, sharp, unstoppable. But when the boardroom emptied and the spotlight dimmed, Emily often felt a quiet emptiness creeping in. Late at night, when the city hummed below, she would stare out the window and wonder if success alone could ever fill the silence. Beneath her polished smile lived a woman searching for something she couldn't quite name. Michael Carter's world looked nothing like Emily's. At 35, he carried the weight of life not in briefcases, but in his strong, calloused hands. Broad-shouldered, dressed in a faded gray t-shirt and worn jeans, he blended into the background of the office where he worked as facilities manager. To most executives, he was invisible, the man who changed light bulbs, fixed air conditioners, and swept halls no one noticed. But to Emily, he was different. Something in his eyes, steady, tired, but unbroken, pulled at her in ways she didn't understand. Michael lived for one reason, his daughter, Lily. At just 8 years old, she was the light in his life, the smile that got him through each day. Since her mother's passing, Michael had carried both roles, father and mother, without complaint. He packed lunches, tied shoelaces, and read bedtime stories, even after long days of work. The neighbors admired his devotion, whispering that he was the kind of father you rarely saw anymore. But behind the closed doors of their modest suburban home, Michael often sat alone at night, staring at a framed photo of his late wife, the pain etched deep in his silence. Emily noticed these things, not directly, but in the subtle way he carried himself. She saw how he rushed to leave work exactly on time, never staying a minute late, always with a purpose in his stride. She caught glimpses of him at the coffee machine, shoulders tense, eyes distant, as if living in a world far heavier than the office around him. Unlike the men who flaunted charm or ambition to impress her, Michael carried something else entirely, quiet sacrifice. And somehow that silence spoke louder than words. Still, they were worlds apart. Emily stood at the head of boardrooms, dazzling investors with confidence. Michael climbed ladders to replace ceiling lights, often unnoticed by the people whose meetings he worked around. She dined at rooftop restaurants, he heated leftovers in the break room microwave. On paper, they had no reason to ever collide. Yet life has a way of stitching unlikely lives together, sometimes with nothing more than a single thread of curiosity. That thread tugged at Emily one crisp autumn evening. She spotted Michael leaving the building with a heavy duffel bag slung over his shoulder. He didn't look like a man heading home. His steps were firm, focused, almost secretive. Sitting in her sleek black SUV, Emily felt her heart race in a way it hadn't in years. She didn't know why she did it, but she turned the key, pulled out slowly, and began to follow. In that reckless moment, a door to another world cracked open. Street after street, Emily's curiosity grew. Michael's old pickup truck led her far from the shining skyline into darker corners of the city. Streetlights flickered, buildings leaned tiredly against one another. This wasn't a place she had ever been before. With every turn, her questions deepened. Where was he going? What secret weighed on his shoulders so heavily he carried it in silence? Something inside her told her that the truth, whatever it was, would change the way she saw him forever. Michael had always kept his life locked tight from everyone at work. He didn't joke around, didn't linger in conversations, didn't let anyone close. But Emily couldn't ignore the pull she felt whenever she saw him, like he carried a story too heavy for one man alone. And as her SUV trailed him deeper into the night, she knew this was no longer about curiosity. It was about connection, about the possibility that behind his quiet walls lived a truth worth uncovering, one that might change both of their lives. Emily kept a safe distance as Michael's pickup slowed and turned into a neighborhood she had never dared to enter. The streets were cracked, lined with rusted fences and graffiti-stained walls. Dim yellow lights flickered above broken sidewalks. Her luxury SUV looked painfully out of place, its polished curves reflecting a world of struggle. Michael parked in front of a crumbling apartment building, the duffel bag heavy in his grip. Emily's pulse quickened as she whispered to herself, "What are you doing here?" From her car, she watched children rush out from the shadows, their small bodies thin beneath worn-out clothes. Their laughter was soft but desperate, like it hadn't been heard often enough. Michael knelt down, his strong frame gentle as he unzipped the bag. He handed out sandwiches wrapped in foil, warm blankets, and even small toys that made little eyes light up. Emily felt her chest tighten at the sight. This man, who spoke so little, carried a heart louder than any speech she'd ever given. A little boy clutched a sandwich in both hands, looking up at Michael with a smile. "Thank you, Mr. Carter," he said, voice cracking with gratitude. Michael ruffled the boy's hair and replied softly, "You're welcome, kiddo. Everyone deserves to be warm tonight." His voice was steady, but Emily could hear the weight behind it, the kind of love born from loss. She leaned back in her seat, eyes stinging, unable to reconcile the man at work with the one before her now. When the children scattered back into the building, Michael sat on the steps, pulling something small from his pocket. Emily squinted, watching him hold a silver locket between his hands. The way he stared at it, the grief in his eyes, made her breath catch. He wasn't just helping strangers, he was carrying his own ghosts. His thumb traced the locket as though it were the last fragile piece of someone he once loved. Emily had no doubt it belonged to Lily's mother. For the first time, Emily saw Michael not as an employee, but as a man scarred by tragedy, yet still giving everything he had left. She whispered into the quiet, "How can someone lose so much and still give so much more?" The contrast between her world and his hit her harder than any boardroom loss ever could. She thought of her luxury dinners, her endless schedules, and how empty they suddenly felt in comparison. Her heart knew she couldn't unsee what she'd just witnessed. But Michael's sharp movements pulled her back. He stood suddenly, scanning the street with alert eyes. Emily ducked down in her seat, pulse hammering. For a terrifying moment, she thought he had spotted her. His shoulders tensed, his jaw clenched, and he clutched the locket tight before slipping it back into his pocket. It wasn't paranoia, it was something else. He looked like a man who knew danger was never far away. Emily stayed frozen as he climbed back into his truck, headlights flashing on. She let out the breath she had been holding, heart pounding so loud she sweared it could echo through the glass. "What are you hiding, Michael Carter?" she whispered, gripping her steering wheel. She had thought her curiosity was satisfied, but now she knew it was only beginning. Whatever secrets he carried, they were bigger than charity alone. As she followed his truck back toward the safer parts of town, Emily's hands trembled on the wheel. She had stepped into something she couldn't turn away from. The image of those children, the locket, the shadow of grief in Michael's eyes, it all burned into her memory. Deep down, Emily felt it. This wasn't just Michael's story anymore. Somehow, it was about to become hers, too. The next morning, Emily sat at her desk, but her mind wasn't on quarterly reports or investor calls. All she could see were the children's faces, the way their eyes lit up when Michael handed them food. She tried to drown herself in work, yet the memory tugged at her heart like a song she couldn't turn off. Every time Michael walked past her office door, she found herself staring. But instead of curiosity, it was something deeper now, a pull she couldn't explain. Michael, however, had noticed. He felt her eyes lingering on him in the hallways, during lunch breaks, even in the parking lot. It unsettled him. He had built his life on staying unnoticed, keeping his world small to protect Lily. The last thing he needed was the attention of Emily Parker, the boss, the millionaire, the woman whose spotlight could ruin everything he had carefully kept hidden. Still, every time their eyes met, he couldn't shake the feeling that she had seen too much. That evening, Emily couldn't resist. She drove to his neighborhood again, parking discreetly down the block. Through the window of his modest house, she saw a softer side of Michael. He was at the kitchen table with Lily, patiently helping her with math homework, his voice gentle and encouraging. When Lily yawned, he scooped her up in his arms, carrying her to bed like she was still a toddler. Emily felt her throat tighten. This wasn't a man who just survived. This was a man who loved with everything he had. When Lily was asleep, Michael returned to the living room. He sat heavily on the couch, pulling out the same silver locket she had seen the night before. His thumb brushed it slowly, eyes filled with sorrow that no words could describe. Emily's chest ached as she whispered from her car, "Your pain, it's still alive in you." She wanted to step inside, to tell him he didn't have to carry it alone. But she stayed still, afraid her presence might break the fragile world he was holding together. The following day, Emily decided she couldn't keep her silence any longer. She waited until most employees had left, then walked toward him in the dimly lit parking lot. "Michael," she said, softly, her voice uncertain, "I saw you. The children, the food, the blankets. I know." His eyes snapped toward her, shock hardening into anger. "You followed me?" he demanded, his tone sharp, protective, almost fearful. Emily nodded, her breath catching. "I just needed to understand." Michael's jaw tightened as he stepped closer. "Stay out of my life, Miss Parker. You don't know what you're getting into." His words were like steel, meant to push her away. Emily froze, stung by the sudden wall he threw up between them. But behind his anger, she caught a flicker of something else, fear. It wasn't just about her knowing, it was about what might happen if others knew too. And that made her heart pound with more questions than answers. As Michael walked away into the night, Emily stood rooted to the pavement, the echo of his footsteps cutting into her chest. She had crossed a line, and he wanted nothing to do with her. But her instincts screamed at her that something darker was hiding behind his secrecy. The way he clutched the locket, the way he scanned the streets, the sharpness in his voice. It wasn't about pride, it was about danger. And for the first time, Emily realized that Michael wasn't just protecting his daughter, he was protecting them from someone. Driving home, Emily gripped the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. She could have turned back, left his secrets buried in the shadows. But she knew herself too well. The truth had already hooked itself into her heart. And though Michael had told her to stay away, she couldn't, because deep down, Emily Parker knew this wasn't just his fight anymore. Something told her fate had just tied their lives together, whether either of them wanted it or not. It was late one evening when Michael pulled into his driveway, the sun already dipped below the horizon. From the curb, everything looked normal, but his gut twisted the second he saw his front door cracked open. He froze, every instinct on high alert. Dropping his keys, he rushed inside, his voice breaking the silence. "Lily?" Panic surged as he searched the darkened rooms, heart hammering in his chest. Emily had been nearby that night, unable to let go of her concern. She had parked down the street, her headlights off, when she saw Michael sprint into his home. Fear jolted her. Something was wrong. Without thinking, she ran after him, her heels clicking against the pavement, her own pulse racing faster than her feet. By the time she entered the house, she found Michael tearing through the living room, his face pale with dread. "Lily!" he shouted again, his voice raw. Emily followed, her own breath caught in her throat. A faint sound answered them, a soft whimper from behind a bedroom door. They burst inside to find Lily crouched under the bed, eyes wide with terror. Michael fell to his knees, pulling her into his arms, whispering, "It's okay, baby. Daddy's here." Relief washed over him, but only for a moment, because the damage around them told a darker story. The house had been ransacked, drawers yanked open, papers scattered across the floor, a photo frame of his late wife shattered in the corner. Michael's hands trembled as he set Lily on the bed, his jaw clenching with rage. Emily stood frozen, her eyes scanning the chaos. "This wasn't a robbery," she whispered, the certainty in her voice chilling even herself. Michael looked up at her, the weight of his silence saying more than words ever could. Finally, he broke. His voice was low, shaking, but steady enough to pierce the air. "They're back." Emily's brow furrowed, confusion tightening her chest. "Who's back?" she pressed, her voice soft but insistent. Michael's shoulder sank, the fight leaving him as he sank into a chair, pulling the locket from his pocket. He stared at it before whispering words that made Emily's blood run cold. "My wife. She didn't just die in a car accident. She was murdered." The room seemed to shrink around them. Emily gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Murdered?" she echoed, barely able to believe it. Michael nodded, his eyes clouded with grief and anger. "And whoever did it, they've been watching us ever since. I thought I could keep Lily safe if I stayed quiet, if I lived small. But they're reminding me tonight that silence won't save us." His voice broke on the last words, his pain raw and unshielded. Emily's heart ached as she looked at him, this man who had carried so much alone. She stepped closer, her voice steady, though her hands trembled. "You don't have to face this by yourself, Michael. You're not alone anymore." For a moment, his eyes met hers, walls breaking, vulnerability spilling through. But then he shook his head, whispering, "You don't understand. Getting close to me puts you in danger too." Emily knelt beside him, her eyes burning with conviction. "Maybe I don't understand everything, but I know this. Whatever you're running from, hiding from, I'm not walking away. You've carried this weight long enough. Let me help you now." Michael stared at her, torn between fear and hope, between pushing her away and letting her in. And for the first time in years, he realized he didn't have to stand alone against the storm.
The days that followed were heavy with tension. Michael barely slept, his every step shadowed by the fear of being watched. He kept Lily close, refusing to let her walk to school alone, his eyes scanning every corner like a soldier at war. Emily stayed near too, against his protests, insisting her presence wasn't optional anymore. The weight of danger pressed down on them, turning ordinary life into a ticking clock. And then, without warning, the storm struck. It was a Friday afternoon when Michael walked Lily out of school, her backpack bouncing against her shoulders. The street looked quiet, but a black sedan idled at the curb, engine purring like a predator. A man in a dark suit leaned out of the window, his voice cutting through the air. "You should have kept quiet, Carter." The chill in those words made Michael's blood run cold. He grabbed Lily's hand, whispering urgently, "Run." They bolted, Michael's heart hammering as his daughter stumbled to keep up. Tires screeched behind them, the black car crawling forward like a hunter stalking prey. Lily cried out, terrified, as Michael pulled her into a narrow alley. But just as the sedan swerved to block their path, another vehicle appeared, sleek, powerful, and fearless. Emily's SUV slammed sideways between them, shielding father and daughter from the threat. Her voice cut through the chaos, "Get in!" Michael didn't hesitate. He shoved Lily into the back seat and climbed in after her. Emily floored the gas, the SUV roaring as the sedan gave chase. The city blurred around them, traffic horns blaring, pedestrians shouting, as two worlds collided in a dangerous race. Emily's grip was steady on the wheel, her jaw set with determination. "We're not letting them win," she growled, eyes fierce in the rearview mirror.
The sedan drew closer, headlights flashing, bumper nearly grazing theirs. Michael reached across Emily, seizing the wheel for a sharp turn that sent them veering down a side street. Tires screeched, rubber burned, but they stayed ahead. In the back seat, Lily clung to her father, sobbing into his shirt. "Daddy, I'm scared," she cried. He kissed the top of her head, whispering, "I've got you, baby. I won't let them take you." For a terrifying moment, it seemed like they would be cornered. The sedan closed in, forcing them toward a dead-end street. Emily's pulse pounded as she searched desperately for an out. At the last second, she spotted a narrow service road. "Hold on," she shouted, yanking the wheel hard. The SUV barreled down the uneven path, bouncing wildly, but they broke free from the trap. Behind them, the sedan swerved too late, skidding out in fury. They didn't stop until the city lights faded in the rearview mirror, replaced by the stillness of a deserted parking lot. Emily slammed the brakes, her chest heaving, adrenaline still flooding her veins. Silence fell, except for the sound of Lily's quiet sobs. Michael turned toward Emily, his face torn between anger and gratitude. "You shouldn't have been there," he rasped. Emily met his gaze fiercely. "And if I hadn't, what would have happened to her? To you?" The weight of her words sank into him. For the first time, Michael saw Emily not as an intruder, but a partner, someone willing to risk everything for him and Lily. His eyes softened, his defenses crumbling in the dim glow of the dashboard. "You just put yourself in their sights," he whispered, voice breaking. Emily leaned closer, her hand steady on his arm. "Then let them come, because this time, Michael, you're not fighting alone."
The next morning, Emily refused to let fear drive them into hiding. She called in favors, reaching deep into the network she had built as a business powerhouse. Investigators, journalists, and lawyers began to circle the story, hungry for truth. Michael watched in disbelief as she transformed her wealth and influence into a shield around him and Lily. For years, he had fought alone in silence, but Emily made it clear those days were over. Her strength wasn't just money, it was conviction. Piece by piece, the puzzle of his wife's death unraveled. The files Michael had hidden for years, emails, photographs, documents his wife had secretly collected, were finally placed in the right hands. It turned out she had uncovered corruption tied to powerful executives, men who would stop at nothing to protect their empire. Her car crash had been no accident. It was a warning, silencing the voice that threatened them. And Michael had carried that truth like a stone in his chest ever since. With Emily's backing, the evidence reached the press. Headlines exploded, and the men responsible were dragged into the harsh light of justice. For the first time, Michael didn't feel powerless. He stood in courtrooms and newsrooms, no longer a shadow, but a man demanding truth. And every step of the way, Emily stood beside him. She wasn't there for appearances or credit. She was there because she believed in him. That belief meant more than he could ever say. At home, the weight began to lift. Lily smiled more, her laughter ringing through the small house like music Michael thought he'd lost forever. She clung to Emily, too, as if she had always been part of their family. On quiet evenings, Emily would help Lily with homework while Michael cooked dinner, the three of them sharing a life that felt impossibly normal after years of fear. It was in those small moments Michael realized peace was finally possible. One evening, Michael sat on the porch staring at the sunset, the locket resting in his palm. Emily joined him, slipping quietly into the chair beside him. For a while, neither spoke. Then, with a shaky breath, Michael whispered, "For years, I thought I had to carry this alone, that letting anyone close would only bring them pain." His eyes glistened as he turned toward her. "But you proved me wrong, Emily. You gave us more than protection. You gave us hope." Emily's voice softened as she reached for his hand. "You don't have to hide anymore, Michael. Not from the past, not from the world, not from me." Her fingers tightened around his, steady and sure.
He felt the walls he had built for so long finally crumble. For the first time since his wife's death, he wasn't drowning in grief, he was breathing again. And it was because Emily had stepped into his storm, unafraid. Michael pulled Lily close as she wandered onto the porch, her little arms wrapping around his neck. "Daddy," she whispered, "are the bad guys gone now?" Michael kissed her hair, his voice tender. "They're gone, sweetheart. We're safe now." Emily's eyes met his over Lily's shoulder, and in that moment, safety didn't feel like an illusion anymore. It felt real, tangible, and theirs to keep. The night ended with quiet laughter, the three of them sitting together beneath the fading sky. Emily leaned her head against Michael's shoulder, Lily curled between them like the final piece of a puzzle that had been missing for too long. For Michael, it wasn't just survival anymore, it was living. And for Emily, it wasn't just helping, it was belonging. Together they had turned pain into strength and silence into love.
The sun dipped low, casting streaks of gold and crimson across the sky, painting the world in colors too beautiful to ignore. On the porch of Michael's modest home, the three of them sat together, father, daughter, and the woman who had chosen to stand beside them. Emily's hand rested in Michael's, while Lily nestled safely between them. For once there was no fear, no chase, no shadows lurking. Just peace, simple and quiet, the kind Michael thought he would never find again. Michael looked at Emily, his voice soft but heavy with truth. "You didn't have to do any of this. You could have walked away the first time you saw me in that neighborhood." Emily smiled, her eyes warm. "And miss the chance to meet the strongest man I've ever known? Not a chance." He chuckled quietly, the sound rusty from years of holding back. It was a laugh Emily knew she would never grow tired of hearing. Lily looked up at Emily with innocent curiosity. "Does this mean you're staying with us now?" Her little voice was hopeful, her eyes shining like stars. Emily leaned down, brushing a strand of hair from Lily's cheek. "If you'll have me, sweetheart." Lily grinned, wrapping her arms around Emily's waist as if to claim her forever. Michael's heart swelled at the sight, the ache of loss slowly being replaced with the fullness of new love. As the evening deepened, Emily rested her head against Michael's shoulder, the cicadas humming softly in the distance. "You know," she whispered, "I thought success was about numbers, titles, skyscrapers. But I was wrong. It's about moments like this. Laughter, love, family. This is what matters." Michael tightened his arm around her, his voice low. "I spent years thinking I'd lost everything. Turns out life was waiting to give me a second chance." The truth hung in the warm night air, undeniable. Strength isn't measured in bank accounts or boardrooms. It's measured in sacrifice, in love that shows up when it's hardest, and the courage to keep going when the world tries to break you. Michael had carried that strength all along, and Emily had reminded him he wasn't meant to carry it alone. Together, they had turned their scars into something unshakable, a foundation for a future neither had expected. In that moment, their story became more than survival. It became a lesson, a reminder that love can be found in the most unlikely places, that kindness has the power to change lives, and that family isn't always the one you're born into, but the one you choose to fight for. For anyone listening, their story whispered a truth we all need to hear. No matter how dark life gets, light can find its way back in. As the porch grew quiet, the last glow of sunset fading into twilight, Emily looked at Michael and Lily with a smile that said everything words couldn't. They didn't need promises or plans. They had each other, and that was enough. The three of them sat hand in hand, watching the stars appear one by one, their new beginning written across the night sky. And so, as their story closes, let it leave something with you. The reminder that hope is never lost, and love is always worth holding on to. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe for more inspiring stories like this. Because sometimes, all it takes is a single choice, a single act of kindness, to change everything.
And who knows, the next story might just change your life too.